do Sidney Crosby, an elderly woman in a nursing home, a young man in a persistent vegetative state, an unborn baby, and a Syrian refugee all have in common? Although each of these individuals look very different, each of these examples are part of the human race. But do each of these individuals have equal value as human beings? How do we know? Who or what determines the value of a human life? As a prospective nurse and a person concerned about the blurred lines and changing ethics of this brave new world, I'd like to offer a bit of my perspective on this topic. When we talk about the value of a human life, we need to define the terms. Are we simply talking about living beings? Because we could determine that each of these beings are alive, but we also know that each cell in your body is alive. What's the difference between the two? What we need to talk about is personhood. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states in Section 15, every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination, and in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Again, the question is, who is an individual? Let's take a look at some factors we could use to determine personhood. Sometimes, personhood is based on reaching a certain stage of development, say when a baby's heart begins to beat or when the ability to feel pain develops. The problem with this standard is that human beings develop from conception to adulthood. Can we really draw any line between the two and base personhood on that? One person may say that personhood begins when a heart begins to beat, and another may say that babies don't have rights until 1 month after birth. Which of these two is correct? They can't both be right. Some people suggest that humans become people when they acquire certain abilities, such as the ability to reason. But there are people with significant mental handicaps that would prevent them from meeting this requirement. Does that mean they're not people with equal value and rights? Or what if they lose that ability because of illness? Defining personhood based on acquired abilities is a dangerous, slippery slope. A third way to determine personhood is by how much a human is wanted. Consider these two situations. One woman conceives through rape. Another finally is able to conceive after struggling with infertility. One woman gets an abortion. The other uses every medical aid possible to carry the pregnancy to term. The only difference between the two is how much a child is wanted. Should we really be deciding if human beings are equals and entitled to life based on how convenient their life is to us? These three arguments for personhood are all subjective, based on the opinions of others. They offer no reasonable standard, and they sound dangerously like George Orwell's famous line, "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." I suggest that the only reasonable, reliable, and fair definition of personhood is the duration of a human life, from conception to death. Having said all that, why does defining personhood matter to us? Let's consider abortion, for instance. If personhood begins at conception without being determined by age or ability, this seriously questions the ethics of abortion. Instead of only considering the mother and her wishes and situation, there is another person to consider, the child, an equal and as deserving of life and protection as its mother. Remember, how are we defining personhood? Is there logically any difference between terminating a pregnancy and euthanizing a newborn? Speaking of euthanasia, let's take a look at that. The right to die movement has been gaining popularity in the last few decades. A hot-button issue is whether we should allow patients who are in a coma or a persistent vegetative state to die by removing the life support systems from their bodies, including feeding tubes. Don't forget that many people around us rely on life support systems, such as respirators, insulin pumps, and/or pacemakers to stay alive. Are we determining personhood based on abilities or on how convenient a life is to us? Another thing to consider is the shift in patient care as abortion and euthanasia become more common. A more efficient medical system that is less tolerant of handicaps and difficulties will naturally be less focused on care and support and more likely to label cases as hopeless. For instance, in the Netherlands, it is legal to euthanize mentally ill patients and patients as young as 12. As we discuss this issue of personhood and the value of human life, maybe we are asking the wrong questions. Maybe instead of asking who has the right to die, we should be asking who has the right to live. These are matters of life and death, and they affect us all.